Ahead tonight, the Caribbean community preparing to meet in the Bahamas this week. And coming up in sports, the Dan Marino and Friends football weekend boosting sports tourism. The Bahamas Tonight, the weekend edition, starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
Good evening, everyone. I'm LaDawn Davis, and welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the weekend edition. Thanks so much for tuning in. We begin our news tonight from the Northern Bahamas. Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister Fred Mitchell, along with a delegation of government officials and other stakeholders, began implementing new immigration policies for that island during a high-level meeting this past Friday. Megan Shepard of our Northern Service reports tonight that officials assure Abaco residents that immigration operations will be executed in a safe and humane manner.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, the Honorable Fred Mitchell, on Abaco over the weekend, hosting a staging meeting with leaders from various organizations, including the Department of Immigration, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the local Christian Council, and the Department of Social Services. Minister Mitchell says he wants to assure the public that movement is underway to combat two leading problems.
We have a law enforcement problem, and we are engaged in a war where people are coming into the country, breaking the laws, subverting the legal order in the country. And it appears that we have two enemies. We have those people who are breaking the laws, and then we have a group of people who have become, it appears, experts at creating the idea that you have victims and therefore nothing should be done about it.
In order for operations to be successful, Minister Mitchell says public support is crucial. He says it is a matter of protecting national security, national identity, and the country's way of life.
It will require two things. One is law enforcement, but the other it will require is a sensitivity, because as the man in Hopetown, when he was speaking to me on the phone, said, we're drowning over here in illegal migrants, but at the same time we have a tourist sector that we have to be sensitive to. So the question of the logistics here this morning is, how do we balance those competing interests? And because you could, as I've said to the officers in Nassau, you could, by a single act, tip the balance against whatever you're doing, because all of this requires public support.
Member of Parliament for North Abaco, Renato Curry, thanking the minister and his team for their efforts in this operation. He says as work is carried out throughout the island, it is key that officers remember to carry out their duties in a professional manner.
Anytime you're dealing with human life, you ought to remember that everything ought to be done through the highest dignity. We want to exercise respect at all times to ensure that, as you say, our reputation as a country has always been a friendly country. We've always been known as a Christian nation. So that should portray in our operations and our actions.
As new officers have recently been deployed to the island, a familiarization tour was carried out throughout various Haitian communities on the island. Megan Shepard, ZNS Network News.
A final report on that fatal plane crash in Grand Bahama last year that killed 9 people has been released. The report, compiled by the Department of Civil Aviation's Aircraft Accident Investigation and Prevention Unit, confirmed the Bombardier Learjet made an initial approach to Grand Bahama International Airport's runway 16. But due to poor visibility and rain, the crew executed a go-around procedure. The report indicated that during the second attempt, the aircraft struck a crane positioned at Dock 2 of the Grand Bahama shipyard, approximately 222 feet above sea level, some 3.2 nautical miles from the runway. A 3-second fireball was observed as a result of a contact between the aircraft and the crane. The aircraft's right side outboard wing, landing gear, and fuel tank separated on impact, which resulted in the aircraft traveling out of control before crashing inverted into a pile of garbage and other debris in the city services garbage and metal recycling plant near the Grand Bahama shipyard. Both crew members and 7 passengers were killed. The Accident Investigation and Prevention Unit has determined that the probable cause of this accident was the poor decision-making of the crew in initiating and continuing a descent below the authorized altitude without visual contact with the runway environment. Flags from the countries of the Caribbean community mounted on flagpoles on roundabouts throughout western New Providence is just one way the Bahamas welcomes its Caribbean counterparts participating in the 26th intersessional meetings of heads of government of the Caribbean community set for this Thursday and Friday at the Malia Nassau Beach Resort on Cable Beach. Topics on the agenda include the need to leverage CARICOM's human, cultural, and natural assets for economic development, regional security, particularly in light of ISIS, immigration reform, financing and composition of the Marijuana Commission, relations with the Dominican Republic, among others. There will also be a meeting for regional foreign ministers during this week's regional sessions. Stay tuned to the ZNS network for live coverage of this week's CARICOM heads of government meetings. After this week's CARICOM meeting, the Bahamas will then host the 9th International Labor Organization meeting of the Caribbean Ministers of Labor at the British Colonial Hilton Hotel, March 3rd and 4th. An email from the ILO confirmed Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie and ILO Director General Guy Ryder will address the opening ceremony. Under the theme Decent Work for Sustainable Development, the meeting will address labor issues such as the green economy, social dialogue, and youth employment. Labor ministers will discuss the CARICOM and ILO partnership and the implementation of decent work in national and regional policy agenda, as well as the regional tripartite social dialogue mechanism. This is the second time the Bahamas will host the ILO Caribbean Ministers meeting. The government recently revealed 3 companies bidding to become the second company in this country to operate a national cellular license, which has become welcoming news for the thousands of wireless customers. While President of the Bahamas Communications and Public Officers Union, Bernard Evans, is objecting 2 of those bids. He strongly believes that Cable Bahamas and Digicel should not be considered for a cellular license because both companies, in his view, do not acknowledge the rights of their employees.
Digicel do not recognize any trade union in countries that they represent. All right, we have made this plea before to the government of the Bahamas. They say that Digicel should not even be invited to bid because of their stance on not allowing, the citizens in the country that they operate to organize. Cable Bahamas is another company that has come here on the backs of the Bahamian people and taxpayers, came here with a briefcase and a dream. The monies from the taxpayers were given to them to build Cable Bahamas, and they've done nothing but take advantage and exploit workers at Cable Bahamas. We had to go to the Supreme Court for them to recognize the bargaining unit. It has been 20 years that we've been trying to get them to the table to negotiate.
An island-wide anti-crime operation last night yielding significant results for police. An adult male was arrested in Fox Hill around 9 o'clock last night when officers from the operation team found a handgun with 11 rounds of ammunition in his possession. Another arrest took place shortly before 2 o'clock this morning when officers were tipped off to Arawak Key, where they observed a 25-year-old male in a nightclub acting suspiciously. The officers approached the suspect, who then reportedly attempted to pull a handgun from his waist. The officers, in fear of their life, shot the suspect to his left side. The officers later recovered a handgun along with 6 live rounds of ammunition, as well as 16 small packages of marijuana from the suspect. Police also discovered that the suspect is on bail for an indictable offense and wears a court-issued electronic monitoring device. Police confirmed that the suspect is detained in hospital tonight under heavy police guard. Meanwhile, 29 people in total were arrested during the overnight operation for armed robbery, stolen vehicle, and possession of dangerous drugs. Scores of law enforcement officers, civil servants, and other public officers assembled at the Centerville Seventh-day Adventist Church yesterday afternoon for the 20th annual service of Thanksgiving. Senior officials from the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces, the Bahamas Department of Corrections, and Immigration gathered to worship and gain spiritual guidance for another year. Governor General, Her Excellency Dame Marguerite Penling, also attended the service. Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Bernard Nottage, reminisced on the history of law enforcement in the Bahamas and offered words of encouragement.
People have to understand the challenges that are facing the nation. Have to understand those challenges. Reverend gentlemen, I want to thank you all sincerely for this service. Just as you are wishing to express your gratitude to them, I think some of them need to hear it so they can be encouraged in the way that they do.
In his sermon, President of the South Bahamas Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Pastor Paul Scavella, saluted the civil servants for their unselfish work ethic and encouraged them to continue in spite of the ongoing challenges.
We seek to encourage us and to give words of guidance to those of you who serve in the capacities that you do. And we do hope and trust that over these past 20 years, this service has indeed helped to give you some encouragement as you go along.
The Greek Festival, that story coming up in the Bahamas Tonight, the weekend edition.